Hello and welcome. You're watching FYI. I'm Sonal, Mehrotra, Kapoor. Now, this is the dengue season. It's upon us in the national capital and several other metros as well. And if you talk about UP, a more severe form of dengue has actually got in there, and it has taken so many lives as well. So we thought, let's do a show for you where we decode what exactly is dengue, how to stay away from it, how to stay safe, and also to try and keep in mind what you can do in case you have been diagnosed with dengue as well. So let's get into our explainer. All right, firstly, what are some of the first symptoms of dengue that emerge that you should be watching out for, especially if you are in the national capital as numbers here are going up so badly? Well, first, the thing that you have to keep in mind is usually it begins to show symptoms on the 4th or the 6th day after the bite of the mosquito. After the 4th or the 6th day, you will suddenly see high fever. It will spike. It will not remain to be low or anything. It will be very, very high fever that will remain so for quite some time. You will also notice headaches. There will be pain in joints as well. And very classic telltale sign of dengue is when you start feeling pain behind your eyes. Vomiting and rashes, that's also seen as another form of an indicator that you indeed have dengue. But remember, dengue, if you have doubts that you might have had it, go to your doctor. They will probably refer you to some tests, and very clearly you get to know in those tests whether or not you have dengue. But now the complication this year around is not just dengue, but a more severe form of dengue. Remember that something that we are noticing and witnessing in UP, for example. This is said to be one where patients may develop severe forms, and thus the signs and complications are also much more severe. High fever, of course, remains to be the case, but there is bleeding that is seen under the skin. Internal bleeding might take place, massive fatigue and restlessness as well. Especially if seen in kids, you must be immediately reporting them to the doctor and get the checks done as well. Crucial to get medical help at the earliest, whether or not, whichever form of dengue actually you do get. But talking about the most severe form of dengue, let's see what actually happened in UP. In Firozabad, for example, at least 300 cases of dengue and viral fever came in. In fact, it was said to be a mystery disease at first because people didn't know whether or not it was dengue, because on paper, theoretically at least, dengue is not fatal. It does not take away people's life. You see a dip in your platelet count, etc., but then you don't see people losing their life to dengue. They immediately get some help and they recover. But why were kids dying out of it? Again, because this was said to be a more dangerous, more severe form of dengue. What happened in Firozabad? At least 51 people died there. At least so far, that's the number count. In Mathura, 4 more villages reported cases. Again, dengue-like fever over there. Could be a complication or perhaps a mix of 2 diseases as well. Cases have increased in UP, Balia district as well in the past 10 days. So it seems to be spreading around that area. And Prayagraj, 170 children admitted to Motilal Nehru Hospital on the 5th of September, again with the same viral fever that nobody knew how to keep in check and control that as well. Many of these patients required oxygen support as well, something again that is very unlike what regular dengue that as we knew it would entail, but this is again a more severe form. Cases of viral fever have been reported ever since in Varanasi, in Basti as well. So like I said, this more severe form of dengue seems to be spreading more and beyond at this point, and not just Mathura, not just Firozabad, but other places as well. So all of us need to be careful about it. Don't get paranoid, just be careful that this is likely to happen. So in case you want to avoid, you must avoid dengue altogether. What are some of the big do's and don'ts that you must keep in mind? For example, simple things that the government reminds you every year of: dispose solid waste properly, remove any artificial or man-made spots of pots, don't let any fresh water accumulate anywhere, which can be a good breeding ground for mosquitoes. Cover all the containers or empty vessels in your garden and your terrace, etc. In your kitchens, be watchful about that. Clean water storage and in containers regularly, so just keep changing that as well. Minimize skin exposure to mosquitoes. So the best thing to really do is use mosquito repellent, sprays, creams, nets, whatever works best for you really. and use mosquito nets when not sleeping in an air-conditioned room as well. Make sure doors and windows are free of holes and closed when not in use, and avoid traveling to areas which have a spread of or a high risk area, as they are called, of dengue fever as well. Now, we also pulled out for you, apart from that, just these basic do's and don'ts about the statistics on what exactly are the dengue figures telling us about the disease in the past couple of years. Since 2015, cases in Delhi, at least for the moment, went up to almost 16,000 there and 60 deaths. 2016, cases went up to over 4,500, deaths were 10 cases. In 2017 were again around 9,200 there and 10 deaths. Cases in 2018 came down to around 7,000, deaths here were just 4. 2019 cases came down further to 5,000, no deaths. 2020 cases were just about 1,269, no deaths again, which is good news. And 2021 until July at least, cases in the national capital at the moment 99 and no deaths as well. Alright, so having understood that, let's go to our panel now to try and decode what exactly is this new form of dengue, and then the regular dengue also. Is it evolving? Is there something we need to change in the way we are looking at the virus in our protocol as well? Joining us today is Dr. Manoj Sharma. Dr. Romil Tikku is with us as well, and Dr. Seema Dheer is also with us. Dr. Sharma, let me begin with you. On, apart from just the quick do's and don'ts that I highlighted, anything else you want people to keep in mind specifically, or are you seeing emerge as a trend this year specifically?
See, like there is a lot of, a scare of COVID-19. So because of which people are not really reaching out to the healthcare providers. They are scared, maybe they go to healthcare provider and they will be tested for COVID-19 and they may be put for quarantine and so on. So there is a lot of scare of that. Beside that, there is a seasonal flu also going around. Right. And there had been pretty incessant rains also, particularly in UP. Not many areas are flooded. So there was a very conducive and favorable conditions for mosquito to breed. So this fever particularly is people are getting little confused between whether it is common flu or it is COVID or it is, we have this gastroenteritis also this season and enteric fever. So there's a lot of confusion. So people may not take it seriously, okay, this could be dengue. So they may take it as a normal flu, while on the contrary, they may present very late in the course of the disease, leading to complication.
I understand.
As such, the profile of disease has not changed. I mean, we have always had people like hemorrhagic or dengue presenting at ARDS or dengue sac syndrome. So we have a wide spectrum of dengue fever. But if the patients, if they reach out to the healthcare providers early in the course of the disease, and if it is checked properly, and over medication, particularly over-the-counter medication and NSAIDs or painkillers, they should be avoided, which can be more harmful. So if the patient is taking just paracetamol, hydrating himself well, and to reach out healthcare professional in timely manner is required.
I see. So dengue often getting confused with something else is a story that we've been covering year on year. But this time with COVID coming just at a time when a lot of people actually got their second dose as well, is also a complication, because people kept thinking this is a fever that we've got because of the second shot, or this is just flu, not understanding whether or not this is dengue or no. But let me go to Dr. Dheer on this. Dr. Dheer, if you look at dengue, and I'm not talking about the kind of fever or the kind of dengue that has spread in UP, I'll come to that in a bit, but at this point, how many patients who actually get diagnosed with dengue do you think actually end up in hospitals? Is this a disease that if controlled earlier can be managed at home?
See, all viral illnesses, including dengue, are self-limiting. So most of the dengue patients can actually be very well managed at home with simple paracetamol and adequate hydration. And I would say just about 10-15% of people actually have a fall in their platelet count, and just about 5-10% of the people have the real complications of dengue shock syndrome and dengue hemorrhagic fever. So I would say approximately about 85 to 90% of the patients can very easily be managed at home with hydration as well as medication. However, if they develop any pain abdomen, excessive nausea, vomiting, any respiratory discomfort, or any bleeding from any side, any rash on their body, then that are the warning signs. And that is the time when they should think that they have to report to the hospital.
They should be reported to the hospital, and perhaps constantly keep in touch with your doctor and take steps only as advised. This is something all of us have learned in the pandemic at least. Dr. Tiku, come in on this point. Dengue in kids now, more and more being seen in UP. Have we managed to decode why exactly this is happening? Is this a new variant, as they say? Is this a new kind of a mosquito that we are looking at? And how is it spreading? And the same kind of more severe dengue is spreading?
Well, it's the same virus, and strains are different. There are 4 strains. So in a lifetime, you can get infected 4 times. And then you get immunity against that particular strain, you get immunity for life. But the flip side is, if you get infected again with a second strain, you can have a severe disease, or you can land up getting hospitalized. So we don't know the seropositive negative status of these people, and we don't know which strain is predominant there right now. So dengue 2 strain is the most virulent, the most dangerous strain, apart from dengue 4. 1 and 3 are supposed to be mild. So we have to figure out through genomic sequencing and see which particular strain has led to infection over there. Children are anyway high risk for infections because they are not immune to such infections. So basically it boils down to early detection. That is the key. If you know that you have dengue, you'll take proper precautions. See, dengue, the disease lasts from 2 to 7 days on average. So if early detection happens, you'll take precautions. Now, what are the precautions? Don't take painkillers, take paracetamol, and drink lots of fluids. A lot of people think it's only about platelets. It's not about platelets. Your platelets might be normal and you might be in the ICU, struggling. So it's about fluid intake. Yeah. Yeah. What happens in severe dengue, which happens to very few people, majority of the patients, as Dr. Dev said, will have mild disease or asymptomatic disease. Only 20% will have moderate to severe disease, and we call it severe dengue. And if you have severe dengue, and if the disease progression is not detected on time, and if you don't have access to medical care, then the mortality can be as much as 20%. But early detection, early medical care, less than 1%. So it presents as a flu-like illness. As you said, the symptoms are headache, body ache, fever, rash, things like that. But when your fever goes, that's when the problem usually starts in severe dengue. That's when plasma leak might happen. You might have fluid leaking inside your abdomen, you'll have ascites, you'll have pleural effusion, you can have multi-organ failure and things like that, respiratory distress, ARDS, and they are the people who need to be in the ICU. So it's not only the first 5 days when you have fever. When the fever goes, after that you have to be more careful. Keep checking your CBC, alternate days, complete blood count. Liver function test is very important because liver gets involved. A lot of patients. So CBC, you have to see.
Yeah, lots of important points in what Dr. Tiku has actually said. But you mentioned about asymptomatic people in dengue. That's something I want to touch upon, but on the other side of this very quick break. Welcome back. You're watching FYI and we're discussing dengue do's and don'ts over here. Let me go back to Dr. Tiku, who got this very interesting, fascinating aspect about asymptomatic dengue. I've never heard about that. Could you give some details?
Well, you could be bitten by a mosquito, Aedes, and you develop dengue, but you might not have typical high-grade fever, headache, body ache, those symptoms which we were mentioning earlier. So you might have very mild fever. You might just brush it off as a normal headache or a mild viral kind of a thing, and you might actually be having dengue and you won't develop all those signs and symptoms. So majority of people actually have such dengue. It's only 20% who have moderate to severe disease, or there are very few who land up in the hospital. The way with COVID you have a symptom. Now how do you diagnose that? See, there are 3 tests. The gold standard is actually the PCR, which we don't normally do. We do the dengue NS1 antigen. That is the test which detects the NS1 protein. Simple test, you get the results in 20 minutes, it's cheap, sensitive, specific. And that's how you diagnose in the first 5 days. After that comes the serological test, IgG, IgM. Now, IgM detects recent infection. IgG tells us about past infections. But in the first 5 to 7 days, you don't do those tests. You do only NS1. And if you're not sure, NS1 is negative, you do a PCR. Now, PCR is not available everywhere. It's an expensive test. So mostly we end up doing NS1 antigen. If NS1 is positive, you have dengue. But it might be negative because there are certain false negatives also. And then you do an IgG, IgM. IgM is positive, then you probably have a recent dengue or if PCR is positive. If you happen to have a viral illness next year and you do a dengue serology and your IgG is positive, that tells you that in the past you had dengue infection. Maybe the same fever which you had, or maybe 5-10 years down the line, whenever you had a viral kind of illness, it was actually dengue. So if your IgG is positive, you had dengue in the past. If your IgM is positive, you have recent dengue, probably in the few weeks or so. And if NS1 is positive, first 5 days.
Right. In fact, thanks to COVID, we all understand what you're actually saying right now. Otherwise, anything like this would be so complicated to actually decode. But I think that's a bit of education we've all gone through as one planet, actually. Dr. Dheer, I want to come to you next on this kind of fever developing in kids, you know, and people are getting a little paranoid about it, especially parents at this point, because it's spread so much in kids. I know Dr. Tiku said earlier that kids are more prone to this, but is there a reasoning behind why does that happen? Why are we seeing mostly kids succumb to dengue? After all, it's a mosquito bite, so it can happen to adults as well.
See, children have basically they get dehydrated much more easily than adults do, and they probably can't really pick up their symptoms at a very early stage that they are uncomfortable. So children, and they anyway have a low pulse pressure. The blood pressure is always slightly on the lower side.
Immunity as well.
So that is why they are definitely more prone to complications of dengue fever.
But Dr. Dheer, don't kids have better immunity as well?
No, immunity is basically the ability to fight getting the disease. But once they have the disease, once they have already acquired the infection, then they have to fight it out. And see, in dengue, I don't really think that immunity does really, because it's not really an airborne disease or something that you get from food. You're getting it from a mosquito bite, which is directly going into your blood system.
No, I meant they would be able to fight out the virus better is what I meant, which is generally what we've seen in case of COVID.
What I'm saying. Because of their they have, the blood pressure in children is generally lower. The volume of the blood in the circulation is lower. So that is why they tend to get complications much more easily. And, the liver dysfunction, encephalopathy, it is seen more commonly in children than it is seen with adults.
Right.
So they do not fight dengue better than adults.
I see. That's a good clarification to get. Dr. Sharma, then when it comes to dengue, really is the bottom line here precaution better than cure? Just mask yourself with lots of repellents in this season, especially ensure that you're not letting water accumulate in any part of your house or your workplace or other places that you go to. Is that the only way out of this?
See, for any viral fever, there are 2-3 things. One is keep yourself hydrated, have adequate sleep. So that will give you one innate immunity to fight any viral infection. So taking adequate sleep and plenty of liquids, that's a key for beat any viral infection. Then as far as children getting more infected as compared to adults, reason is they just keep on roaming around. So, and plus adults can be more careful than children. So wear full sleeves.
That exposure
so be it shirts or trousers. So they have to, you have to cover yourself. Or everywhere one cannot use, say, mosquito nets and all. If you see dengue, say mosquito which injects this virus, can very well bite in the daytime as well. So you cannot have mosquito nets or repellents everywhere. So practically covering yourself, taking lot of liquids, and taking rest. So that's the only preventive measure as far as prevention is concerned. And another thing is very, very important, not to do self-medication. That harm we have seen in COVID also. So those who did self-medication and took many medications which were not desired caused more fatalities as compared to those who did not take anything. So as in dengue, it is paracetamol is the only thing which is safe. Dehydrated, take paracetamol, and if say required, if somebody is getting drowsy or a fever is not settling even after 4-5 days, or somebody is vomiting but some intake is very low, so they need to take healthcare attention in time.
I'm fascinated by the fact that you're making this point, Dr. Sharma, because in certain cases, and I want to go to Dr. Tikku on this one, in certain cases in UP, we saw actually kids being put on oxygen support. That really didn't add up to how we've seen dengue or how we've treated dengue in the past.
Well, that's a complication of severe dengue, respiratory distress, ARDS, when fluid accumulates in your lungs. So that can happen, happens to very few people, but it can happen. It's a severe complication of dengue, where if not treated, if you don't have access to medical care, ICU care, you can die. So that's why these deaths are happening. Maybe the strain is more virulent and maybe it wasn't detected on time. So early detection is the key. Severe dengue, you'll have plasma leak, your hemoglobin falsely goes up, your platelets might drop, you have severe abdominal pain, vomiting, disorientation, bleeding happening, multi-organ failure, your liver, kidney, everything packs up if you're not treated on time. And again, you should have access to a hospital where there's a blood bank because you need platelets, platelet transfusion, then you have donors, so you should have a proper hospital, big hospital. So all these things also matter.
Right.
And it also depends on where it's happening, whether it's a big city, a small city, whether it's a village.
Right.
So all those factors
access to medical health facilities, that's really the key to it all. Thank you all so much for your time. We've learned quite a bit about dengue, I think, and its severe forms today in this program. So thanks for that. That was FYI today. We'll see you again tomorrow. Bye for now.